Did you know that 2,000 years ago on the shores of the Dead Sea in the land of Israel lived a tiny community of people that lived a very unique way of life and was waiting for the end of the world to come? Let's explore this community. Shalom, my friends. This is the Kiva Gersh with Israel in 5, where we give you everything Israel in 5 minutes. Please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or want to keep the conversation going, please do so below in the comments. The name of this community was Qumran. And it's literally across the street or across the road, the modern day road, from the Dead Sea today. And this was a place where a community, a very tiny, special, and unique community lived 2,000 years ago during the time of the Second Temple period in Jerusalem and during the time of the Roman rule in the land of Israel. Now, at the time, there were many different groups, many different subgroups of Jews living in the land of Israel at the time. It was part of the fractioning of Jewish society at the time that led to their defeat and their fall in the Great Revolt between the years 66 and 70. You had Pharisees, you had Sadducees, and you had this group called the Essenes. Now, the Pharisees and the Sadducees basically, had different opinions about certain fundamental core ideas in Judaism, like the role of the oral tradition and certain elements of and practice of Jewish law. But the Essenes were very different from both of them. They were this very tiny, very extreme sect of Jews at the time that was basically fed up with the corruption that they believed to be happening in Jerusalem at the time. And from all over the land of Israel, they kind of left their worlds, left their lives, left their cities, their towns, their villages, wherever they were living. And they came together as this tiny, small group. And they moved to the shores of the Dead Sea. And they created their own little community where they can live by themselves on their own, away from the influences of other kind of philosophies and ideologies and ideas of Judaism, and they could be away from what they believed again was the corruption happening in Jerusalem at the time. And they were a very ascetic group. It was almost entirely men, barely any women, and they had very, very specific ideas. They were very, very into purity, and that's why they built mikvahs, which are purifying baths. Basically, they're special baths of a certain size that are used not for physical cleanliness but for spiritual purity. And they would dunk in these waters every single day to be spiritually pure as much as they can be and as often as they can be. They were focused on writing as well, writing scrolls. They were scribes, and they spent much of their day learning the Torah and other books of the Jewish tradition and copying these scrolls. There were also all kinds of other scrolls and books around at the time that didn't make it into the canon of the Hebrew Bible. They would study these, they would write these, they would copy these. And they kept collections of these scrolls, libraries, in fact. And especially as the Roman threat became stronger and stronger, they hid many of these scrolls away, both scrolls that they wrote and scrolls that they collected from other places, other communities on the land of Israel. In fact, these became the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? The Dead Sea Scrolls that became so famous that the archaeologists found and the historians are still studying until today were their scrolls. This was coming from their libraries, the caves all around their community, right? They lived on the shores of the Dead Sea. Behind them were all these mountains, and in these mountains were all these caves. And they used some of these caves for these ancient libraries, which again became the source of the Dead Sea Scrolls that we know so well about today. So they lived on these shores. They lived a very, very specific ascetic life, and their lives were very much guided by the fact that they felt that at any moment that humanity in general and the Jewish people specifically were on the verge of the end of the world, where there would be this great war between the forces of darkness and the forces of light. And they wrote about this in their scrolls. And this very much guided the way that they lived. They really believed that there wasn't much more to come, but what was to come was going to be very big and very huge and very significant. So they lived this very, focused, ascetic, spiritual kind of lifestyle, really trying to be very, very pure. They had very specific and sometimes very strict interpretations of Jewish law. They fasted a lot, and even on Shabbat, they would treat Shabbat in a very different way than the rest of the nation. They believed that Shabbat was so holy that to go to the bathroom on Shabbat was unholy, and they wouldn't go to the bathroom on Shabbat. Imagine that, waiting a whole day, right, to go to the bathroom. Again, they had very, very specific, very peculiar, relatively kind of traditions. Eventually, they were attacked by the Romans during the Great Revolt that took place from 66 to 70, and they were wiped out. The entire village was wiped out, and there are remains of this village till today. You can go, if you go down to the Dead Sea, there's a sign off the road that says Qumran, and you can go visit the archaeological site, and you can see the remains of this village. So they're part of the Jewish story. They themselves did not survive as a people, and their movement, their ideology, their theology did not survive as well, except for in the history books. But it is part of the story, and it is part of the story of the Jewish people, and a part of the story of the land of Israel. And this is a community that lived 2,000 years ago on the shores of the Dead Sea in the village called Qumran. All the best, my friends, and be well.